Woodstock, August 17th, 1969. It is nearly 8 o'clock in the morning, and the sun has just begun to rise over a field in upstate New York, where 500,000 people have been awake for 2 days straight. The mud, the rain, the crowd 3 times larger than anyone expected. And onto that stage walks a woman in a white outfit, composure intact, voice ready, like this is exactly where she is supposed to be. She looks out at all of it, the exhausted masses, the chaos, the historic weight of what is happening, and she does not flinch. She sings, and every single person in that field hears her. Grace Slick was 30 years old. She had been doing this for 3 years, and she was already the most powerful female voice in rock history. That is not a small thing to say, but it is true. And the story of how she got there, what she built, what she survived, and, perhaps most remarkable of all, how and when she chose to leave, is one of the most complete stories in rock. Not tragic, not unfinished, complete. Before we go into it, if you're new here, this channel is about women who changed rock history. Women who didn't wait for permission. Grace Slick is the 10th story in this series, and I want to tell it the way it deserves to be told. Stick with me. She was born on October 30th, 1939 in Illinois, in a suburb just north of Chicago called Highland Park. Her family moved to California when she was a child, and she grew up in Palo Alto, in a solid, conventional, middle-class household. Her father worked in finance. Her mother was a singer, not a professional singer, but the kind of woman who sang around the house, who had a real voice and used it. Grace inherited that voice and then some. She was not supposed to be a rock musician. She attended Finch College in New York, studied briefly, modeled, worked in advertising. She was attractive and composed and seemed, by all appearances, to be moving toward a conventional life in a conventional world. She was in her mid-20s, living in the Bay Area with her first husband, Jerry Slick, when she went to see Jefferson Airplane play a show at a club in San Francisco. And something shifted. Her account of that night is not complicated. She watched them and thought, I can do that, maybe better. She was not being arrogant, she was being accurate. She went home and started a band with her then husband and brother-in-law, a group called the Great Society, and began writing and performing in the same San Francisco scene that was, in 1965, beginning to understand what it was about to become. She was 26 years old, picking up a guitar and a microphone for the first time, and she was already writing songs that would eventually define an era. One of those songs was called White Rabbit. She wrote it at a piano in her house in the middle of the night, drawing on Lewis Carroll and Miles Davis, and her own very particular sense of where a melody could go if you refused to let it do what it was expected to do. The Great Society recorded it. And then, in 1966, Jefferson Airplane, who had lost their female vocalist to a pregnancy, came calling. They wanted Grace. She joined. She brought the songs with her. In February of 1967, Jefferson Airplane released an album called Surrealistic Pillow. It contained Somebody to Love and White Rabbit. Both were written before Grace Slick arrived at the band. Both were brought with her when she did, and both became 2 of the most recognizable rock recordings of the 20th century. Within months of the album's release, Grace Slick was famous. Not famous the way supporting musicians become famous. Famous the way a voice becomes famous. The way people hear 3 notes and know exactly who is singing. White Rabbit deserves its own examination because it is genuinely strange and genuinely perfect. It does not behave like a rock song. It builds from a near whisper in a minor key. The influence of the bolero is unmistakable, adding weight and urgency with each verse until it reaches an ending that does not so much resolve as explode. Grace's voice follows the same trajectory. It begins controlled, almost academic, and arrives at that final line, feed your head, with an authority that sounds like a command from somewhere beyond the song itself. Her voice had been trained for classical music. It had range and power that most rock singers simply did not have, and she deployed it with a precision that made the excess feel intentional rather than uncontrolled. Somebody to Love is a different animal, rawer, more furious. built on a gospel rock foundation that her voice tears through like something that has been waiting too long to be released. The two songs together announced not just a talent, but a presence. The counterculture suddenly had a voice to organize around, and that voice belonged to a woman. This was not incidental, it was radical. The San Francisco scene of the late 1960s was, for all its idealism, still largely male-dominated in its creative hierarchies. Women sang backup. Women were significant others. Women appeared on stage in supporting roles. Grace Slick did not accept any of those roles. She was a songwriter, a front woman, a creative force, and she spoke her mind in interviews and on stage with a bluntness that the music industry, even the counterculture music industry, was not entirely prepared for. She was opinionated about politics. She was opinionated about drugs. She was opinionated about the war in Vietnam and the structure of American society and the role of music in dismantling it. And she said all of this loudly, on the record, using her own name. She appeared at Woodstock in August of 1969. That image we started with, the sunrise performance, the field of 500,000 people. What is easy to forget looking back is that the band's performance was delayed through the night and into the early morning, and they took the stage at a moment when exhaustion and chaos had fully settled over the crowd. It required something specific to hold a moment like that. She held it. And then there is the Nixon story. In 1970, Grace Slick's daughter, Tricia Nixon, no, let me be precise here, Tricia Nixon, the president's daughter, had attended Finch College, the same school Grace had attended years earlier, and was hosting an alumni tea at the White House. Grace Slick received an invitation. She decided to attend, and she brought a companion, the activist Abby Hoffman. She also claimed, in interviews she gave afterward, that she had intended to spike the punch with LSD. The Secret Service recognized her at the gate and turned her away before she could enter. Whether the intent was real or performance, whether this was genuine plan or countercultural theater, is genuinely uncertain. Grace has told this story herself with obvious satisfaction. The details resist full verification. But the episode is entirely in character, which is perhaps the most important thing to say about it. The 1970s were more complicated than the 1960s. Jefferson Airplane evolved into Jefferson Starship, a transition that produced commercial success but felt, to many listeners, like a gradual softening of the original proposition. The urgency of the airplane era gave way to something more polished, more stadium-ready, more of its new decade. Grace was still there, still central, still writing and performing. In 1971, she had a daughter with her bandmate Paul Kantner, China Wing Slick, who would eventually become a musician herself. The personal and professional intertwined in ways that were sometimes complicated. The alcohol was becoming more serious. She has spoken about this period with the same directness she brought to everything else, not with self-pity, but with a clear-eyed account of what was happening and what it cost. She was performing through years that were harder than they looked from the outside. In 1978, she was arrested following a confrontation with police. The incident made headlines, was widely reported, and became part of a larger public story about the costs of the counterculture decade. She did not collapse under any of it, but she was paying for the previous years in ways that showed. She continued performing into the 1980s. The music changed around her. The decade was not kind to artists whose identity had been forged in the 1960s. Many of her contemporaries fought the current, tried to update their sound, issued statements about relevance and reinvention. Grace Slick watched the landscape shift, made her assessments, and came to a conclusion. In 1989, she retired. She was 49 years old. She did not issue a lengthy farewell statement. She did not mount a goodbye tour designed to extract one last wave of sentiment and revenue from the audience she had spent 20 years building. She said, in the plain language she had always used, that rock and roll was for the young, that she was no longer young, and that she was done. And then she was done. No one made her leave. No health crisis forced her hand. No personal catastrophe pushed her out. She looked at herself and the music and the world she would have to inhabit to keep performing, and she decided that she had said what she had to say. That is an extraordinarily rare thing. Most musicians cannot do it. The pull of the stage, of the audience, of the identity that has been built over decades is almost impossible to walk away from voluntarily. Grace Slick walked away voluntarily, and she did not walk back. She became a visual artist. Her paintings are psychedelic, intricate, figurative, full of the same intensity and attention to detail that her music had. They reference the same cultural touchstones, the same visual vocabulary of the era she came from. They sell for real money. She has built a second career in an entirely different medium, with the same seriousness and the same refusal to be anything other than what she actually is. At 84 years old, as of 2024, Grace Slick is alive and painting. She does not give many interviews. She has not released new music. She has not announced a return to the stage. The question of a comeback has presumably been asked, and presumably dismissed in the tone she has always used for questions she finds uninteresting. Here is what Grace Slick pioneered: the idea that a woman in rock could have full artistic authority, not as a novelty, not as a front for songwriters who were really the creative force, not as a visual asset whose voice was incidental, as the person who controlled the room, who wrote the songs, who held the microphone with complete command, who spoke her opinions on the record, who made creative decisions that shaped the direction of the music. She arrived before Stevie Nicks, before Joan Jett, before Lita Ford and Chrissy Amphlett, and all the others whose stories this channel has told. She set a standard that the others built on, whether they knew it or not, whether they said so or not. She also left before she had to watch herself diminish. She left while she was still Grace Slick, while the voice and the presence and the artistic identity were still intact. And then she built a different life in a different medium, with the same uncompromising commitment to being exactly who she was. That is, in its own way, as radical as arriving at Woodstock in the rising sun and commanding 500,000 people to feed their heads. That is Grace Slick's story. And it is the last story in this first series of 10. If you've watched even a few of these, Janis Joplin, Joan Jett, Stevie Nicks, Dolores O'Riordan, Wendy O. Williams, Lita Ford, Courtney Love, Chrissie Hynde, Chrissy Amphlett, and now Grace, then you have spent time with 10 women who changed what rock music was allowed to be. Each one of them pushed something open that hadn't been open before. Each one of them paid a price for it and did it anyway. I hope their stories stay with you. I hope you tell them to someone else. And I'll see you in the next series.